Sweet. Welcome, everybody, to Athletically Speaking. We're here today with Austin Stokes, bringing him back again. And today we're doing the 2023 preview along with some little conference realignment talk. So, how you been?
Pretty good. It's been a summer call in baseball, so ready to talk about some football.
It's getting that time. August is here. At the end of this month, we have football, and it's been a long time coming.
I think we just hit our last Sunday or last weekend without football until February,
That's
so
right,
looking forward
because
to it.
NFL comes back with the preseason this week.
hmm Looking forward. Really excited to get back after it.
We love to see it. All right, man. What have you been thinking? Conference realignment has hit the sport hard, especially this past week. The Pac-12 is basically gone right now.
Yeah, I think if you're Oregon, it's time to go. It's time to pack it up. If you're a powerhouse school, USC, Oregon, really anybody in that conference that can play, you got to go. Oregon State has a shot to hang around, make it their conference, but as far as just the Pac-12 is concerned, I mean, I think it's time to just do away with the conference. And with the way conference realignments are happening, it seems like we're getting closer to just some conferences being done away with. I'm sure within the next couple years, we'll see a lot of different conferences end up going down. I'm sure, Mountain West, Sun Belt, some of your smaller conferences are going to be next to go. I mean, everybody's coming to the same three. So at this point, I feel like we're almost in a position where we have to start thinking, okay, what do we do to make people want to stay where they're at? Um, I know money's luring people in, Oklahoma, Texas to the SEC. It's going to be a big money grab for them. Same with all these schools moving to Big 10, Big 12. I think it's good for them. I think it's great for the athletes. They're going to get to play some really standout top competition, top of the line guys. But I think at some point something's got to be done. Like this can't be a trend where everybody is going to one of these three conferences every year. And then, I mean, you're putting a lot of smaller conferences just out of business. So that's kind of been my stance on it here recently.
Right, for real. Like you don't think about the domino effect, but like the Pac-12 right now, if they're going to plan on surviving, you're going to have to backfill with somebody, right? Like the
Yeah,
Mountain West, they've already talked about mergers with them. Not to mention like the American Conference, somebody, I mean, the Big 12's taken from them. Like every
yeah,
every big realignment is going to have some other smaller effect by bringing other teams in from smaller conferences. It'll be like the Big East. I mean, somebody's got to
yeah,
go away eventually.
yeah. And I mean, I think within the next couple years, this is far fetched. Not a lot of people are going to agree with this. I think we see a merger of one conference and leagues within that. I think we're going to be seeing so many people trying to jump ship to SEC, Big 10, Big 12 that eventually we're going to have no other option but to play college football. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and make that one big league. And I don't see that happening for the next, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. But still, I mean, if precautionary measures aren't taken and we're just going to keep letting guys jump ship and go to the big dogs, then why even have leagues? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the ACC right now is they're next, basically.
Yeah.
The Pac-12 has done its thing. I mean, the ACC's contract's not till 2036, but Florida State's already been talking. Clemson's, I've seen some reports where
Yeah.
they're trying to get out. They want to find the way out to get into these other leagues because they're going to make more money. They're going to be better competition, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, seeing if they can successfully do that or not is going to be a big thing. But I think one of the important things that we're heading for, like we're obviously the Big Ten, the SEC is top dogs right now. But what I envision is eventually the Power Five conferences will be splitting away from the NCAA. And what I can foresee coming down the line is that these Power Five conferences will merge into like one or two big leagues, and then they're gonna have their own playoff, their own 12 team go ahead. And then the group of five that's left will have their own playoff. And then it's just going to be two separate divisions of
Yeah.
football. And that's how it's going to be for the foreseeable future. But like you said,
I
I
can
don't
see
see
that
that
happening.
for a few years.
No, I mean, I just don't think right now that would fly, but I think it'll be a gradual change. I think within 3 years, we'll start to see more teams moving over to these three or four or five big conferences. And I mean, we say Power Five, but is it a Power Five anymore? You know what I mean?
It's
Like,
true.
is it a Power Four? Are we talking about like these four conferences are competing every year, and now that Pac-12's kind of fallen by the wayside, I don't even think they should be considered, stuff like that. But no, I completely agree. I think within the next 5-10 years, we're going to see exactly what you said. I think we'll see, this becoming a corporation.
Hmm.
People are going to start, it's a money grab. It'll be a lot like the NFL, XFL, USSF, or whatever it's called, USAFL. And it'll be just one of those situations.
It's kind of sad because you see a lot of like the regional rivalries. Like you're seeing Oklahoma State, that's gone. I
Yeah.
mean, Oregon State, Washington State. A lot of these people are just probably not going to play a lot anymore, and
Yeah.
it's kind of
I
the
think
sad
that's
effect of it.
definitely going to, yeah, I think rivalries and the NCAA, well, not necessarily the NCAA, ESPN and College Football Game Day and stuff like that have definitely tried to um, monopolize rivalries and try to
Hmm.
sell them for a lot more than they're worth. And forced rivalries. I mean, we're seeing it right now. Arkansas and Mizzou. I personally don't see that as a rivalry. Nobody really else does. But it's just one of those things that we're seeing manufactured. And there's a couple of those that you could say. I mean, they're trying to over market Texas, Oklahoma right now. I feel like since we're both going over to the SEC, I feel like that might be getting a little more push. I mean, we're Oklahoma fans. As tough as it is to talk about it, 49-0. I don't know if that's a rivalry. You know what I mean? I think that's
Hmm.
just a beatdown. So at this point, I think we're going to see a lot of new rivalries, which I think will be really interesting to see a lot of new in conference rivals. But I love that state, that territory. You're fighting for your state, with these in-state schools. But yeah, I think there will be a replacement. I don't think it'll be how we remember it, but I definitely think there will still be plenty of rivalries for us.
That's the best looking forward to this. All this, like I get to play Arkansas every other year,
Yeah,
LSU every other year. Like those are going to be perfect replacements for a Bedlam. That's not going to
yeah,
happen for 10 years now. Like those games is what's going to bump it to the next level. It's like, all right, I can live with this.
yeah,
One thing I was thinking about earlier, I made a TikTok about this, but the Pac-12 in 2011 was the richest TV deal in the country. And at that
yeah,
point in time, we had Oklahoma, Texas, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State, who Oklahoma had the Pac-12 logo painted on their field,
yeah,
except that the Longhorn Network in Texas was like, we want this and we want to be in your league. And the Pac-12 was like, no. And on top of that, they're like, yeah, you don't really, as Larry Scott said, you don't meet the bar of the Pac-12, so you're not coming in. And it's funny to think about a big what if in college football. If that move was made, what's the Pac-12 look like right now?
yeah. Had Texas gone over, I feel like we would be seeing a shift out of these Midwest conferences, and football would be being played completely on the coast. Um, and my reason for saying that is that sounds like a small team to add Texas, but in 2011, Texas was a force to be reckoned with in that time. They had some spectacular teams. Um, I think had that move happened and had they gone over to the Pac-12, I just think the Big Ten wouldn't be as popular as it is now, or the Big 12 wouldn't be as popular as it is because they would see Texas and Oklahoma go and play on the coast, and well, now we all want to play on the coast.
Hmm.
So I think that'd be a lot more of what we're seeing.
I mean, in 2011, they're 2 years removed from a national championship. Like Oklahoma and
Yeah,
Texas were both right there at the top coming into that move. So it's interesting for sure, but obviously it did not pan out that way.
yeah.
All right, well, let's move on into these conference breakdowns. Let's just start with the top in alphabetical order. ACC. What are you looking for in the ACC this year? Your championships, your champions, the whole thing.
I think I think Florida State wins it. I do. I think Florida State is going to be really competitive all year. I think we're going to see a lot of flip between Florida State and Clemson as far as who's kind of running that division for the next 3 to 4 years. UNC is also another team that's kind of been creeping up there. As far as who I think is going to disappoint, Syracuse has had a lot of momentum the past couple years, and I think Syracuse is going to drop the ball this year. You're playing in the ACC Atlantic. That's tough. Clemson and Florida State and Louisville and a Wake Forest that's been on the up and up the past couple years. That's tough. You're going to have to really show a lot more ground. I mean, they placed higher in the conference rankings than Louisville did, but as a team overall, Louisville is a much better, well-rounded organization than Syracuse, in my opinion. Um, But as far as teams that are just going to let me down, Pittsburgh's another one. In the past couple of years, they've been really riding hot. They've been on the up and up. I just don't see that continuing this year, especially when Duke is competing at the exact same level as they are. In that Coastal Division, I mean, it's probably the weakest of the two. I mean, it is easily with Virginia and Virginia Tech at the bottom. Miami really hasn't done a lot in the past couple of years. Georgia Tech is trying to run an outdated offense. It's really just UNC's conference right now, or UNC's division right now. I think we'll see a lot of Florida, UNC, Clemson towards the end of the season. That'll be the talk. But I think this year's going to go ACC, Florida State.
I agree. I think Florida State, Jordan Travis, I mean, the way they ended the year last year, they get LSU right off the bat. It's going to be a tough game there.
Yeah.
I think that would be like one of the few games that they have to lose on the season.
Mm-hmm.
They might possibly lose a Clemson game, but I think FSU, the defense is going to be there. The offense is obviously going to be there with Jordan Travis. He's he's going to be a Heisman contender. He'll be in New York. So I have
Yeah.
him playing Clemson and beating Clemson in the championship game. It's
I
interesting
can
that
see that.
it's interesting that you mentioned North Carolina because I think North Carolina's offense with Drake May is going to be really good. The
I
flip
think they're
side of
going to be
that coin,
fantastic.
yeah, the flip side of that coin is their defense is bad.
Yeah.
They
Ending the season last year with 4 losses in a row. I mean, it's not good, but who
It's
else in that
tough.
division is going to, or who else in that little group is going to compete with you? I mean,
I
Duke,
agree.
maybe.
And Duke is coming off a year where they won 9 games.
Yeah.
Like that, this Duke squad's going to be good. UNC giving up 42 points to Appalachian State scares me. Last year, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if Gene Chizik is ready to take that step with the defense. I mean, it could happen. I just don't see
Hmm.
it happening. So UNC will be my disappointing team. Miami,
Interesting.
Miami with Tyler Van Dyke coming back. Year 2 and Mario Cristobal. It's this is very important because does Van Dyke play to the level that he should be playing at, right?
Yeah.
That early season game against Texas A&M is going to say a lot about Miami. And if they can come away with a win in that game, I think that will boost some confidence. It'll move them forward for the rest of the year and really be able to like stabilize what they want to do in the ACC.
Hmm.
And I could see them making a push, and I think Van Dyke will be the important player for that team.
My only issue with that is UNC was 6-0 on the road last year. You don't see that number outside of Georgia, Bama, your massive schools. I mean, undefeated on the road in college football is nuts. And I just don't think that Miami can compete and can beat UNC at Miami. And I mean, they were 3-3 at home. I think this year they're going to compete a little better. I mean, they dropped 4 at the end, so they're going to be coming with something on their shoulder. They have a decent recruiting class, nothing out of the ordinary spectacular for them, but I think they're going to be able to patch up that 3-3 home record. And I think Miami is going to be a sleeper team this year. I think they're definitely going to be able to compete, especially like you said with Van Dyke back. I just don't see them topping UNC.
Mm. It's really about the defense for UNC for me. I want to see what Gene Chizik's going to do. The spring game didn't really tell me too much, as spring games do, but it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to watch them for sure. All right, Big 12. What you got?
All right. So Big 12, it hurts me a little to talk about, obviously.
I feel that one.
My ranking for the Big 12 is I've got TCU winning it. 13-2 last year. I have Texas at second. And here's why I have Texas at second, because I really believe in Ewers and I really believe in Sarkisian. And that sucks because I'm an Oklahoma fan, but I think that they have patched the holes that they needed to patch. I mean, a couple of years ago when Charlie Strong was their coach, I mean, they just couldn't do anything right.
Mm.
That Texas team was horrible. And I mean, able to turn that around in what has that been, 4, 5, 6 years, maybe? That's incredible. So I think Texas will be my number 2. They were 8-5 last year. Then I've got Kansas State 10-4 at 3. They shocked me, frankly, last year. I wasn't expecting that big of a year from Kansas State. Lost it in their bowl game. Their bowl game was one of my favorites to watch. But I just don't see them competing with a Texas team that's that put together, because you got to think, I
Mm.
mean, Ewers is going to have a top receiving core to throw it to. His entire offensive line's coming back. The defense is still pretty solid with their linebacking core. So I think they're going to be fine. I just don't see Kansas State beating them. I have Oklahoma State coming in at 7-6 last year. I have Oklahoma State coming in at 7-6. So I definitely think that they'll be able to maintain that success. They finished the season under Texas Tech last year. I don't really think they should have. I know Texas Tech got hot there at the end, won 4 in a row. But I just liked Oklahoma State's presence a lot better. After Oklahoma State, I have Oklahoma. They, 6-7, new coach. I liked what Jeff Lebby was doing. I would rather not talk about Ted Roof right now. That's Venable's defense. I think everybody can agree that that's Venable's defense. Ted Roof, before he got hired, he's one of the few coaching hires Oklahoma made that I had to Google who he was.
Yep.
Then I've got Texas Tech, 8-5. I thought they looked really good. They're not bringing a ton of what they need back. So I don't think that they're going to compete on that same level. The bottom 3, I've got Baylor at 6-7. I just wasn't impressed at all with them last year. 3-3, both home and away. They split it even on a 4-game losing streak to end the season. Nothing really impressed me a ton. And then at the bottom, I've got West Virginia and Iowa State. I mean, West Virginia looked decent for a while. Coming off the season or start of the season, I thought maybe they'd be able to contend. And then Iowa State's just not what they used to be. I remember when Oklahoma would go and play Iowa State, and that was a game that you really needed to look out for because that's a sneaky team.
Iowa State and Ames is scary.
Iowa State and Ames is horrifying. You don't want that game to be close going into the fourth quarter because you're probably going to lose. That's just one of the places to play that it's almost unwinnable at home. I mean, they went 3-4 at home and then 1-4 on the road for a reason. They don't compete well on the road, and this is not a division where you can rely on just your home games to get you by. So that's my Big 12 prediction. Teams that are going to disappoint me, Texas Tech. I just don't see them bringing the same heat that they did. I really think it'll be between TCU and Texas on who wins it. Kansas State might jump out there and scare you, but I think it'll be between TCU and Texas. I'm going to give it to Texas.
This was literally the hardest conference for me because I'm sitting here on paper and Texas looks like the best team in the conference.
Yeah.
Like everything that they have, it should be them. It's, Texas's history hasn't been great with a lot of talent. So will they be able to produce that or not is yet to be seen. But I feel I'm along the same page. I think Texas will be in the conference championship with Oklahoma. I think a second year under the defense with Venables, bringing in some of the transfers that he did, Deshaun McCullough, Trace Ford from State, the guy Boythroyd from Wake Forest, some of these big defensive linemen is going to help that defense a lot. And considering that every game was less than 7 points that they lost last season, I think that they can make that turnaround pretty easily for this season. Because the offense, I think Gabriel was like second in the Big 12 in passing efficiency. Like the offense was fine. It's not the spectacular Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams that we saw, but Dylan Gabriel's not those quarterbacks. So him just doing what he has to do and the defense taking that step up, I think is going to help them tremendously. So I got Texas and Oklahoma in the championship. My team to watch is Kansas. Can Jalen Daniels come out, do what they needed to do again this year? Kansas started 5-0 last year, had college game day in Lawrence for the first time ever. Can they replicate that? Is Lance Leipold going to be able to produce something and build something in Kansas they haven't seen since 2007? So that's the thing for Kansas to watch. Can they replicate what they did last year? My disappointing team in the Big 12 is Texas Tech. I see a lot of people high on them, and I think that's just setting it up for failure. What?
I can't get behind Texas Tech. Lubbock just isn't producing a national champion. Lubbock isn't producing a Big 12 contender anytime for the next 3 years, maybe. They have a good young recruiting class, but they're not going to want to put those guys out for the next 2 years. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I'm right there with you. I just don't see Texas Tech being that competitive.
Texas Tech. I don't know. There's the Big 12 is too deep in the talent of other teams around them for Texas Tech to make that step this year. It's
Yeah,
just not possible for them. I mean, TCU for me is also one of those teams that I think is going to be disappointing for the sole factor. If you go to the national championship, you finished the year 12-0 last year. That's going to be hard. You lost Max Duggan. You lost a lot of talent, both offensively and defensively, that got you to that point. I
hmm,
think that's just going to be really hard to overcome, and you set the bar really high in year one. So
yeah,
them being able to replicate is going to be really difficult for TCU. What do you think? I mean, you got four new teams in the Big 12 this year. Who do you think is
yeah.
going to make the biggest splash coming into this year?
You know, that's tough to say. I mean, you just don't really know how anybody's going to compete. Personally, I don't see Cincinnati competing well, nor do I
Mm-hmm.
see UCF. So Cincinnati is kind of is it's an interesting topic in my opinion because they were lights out for a year and a game. They played all of their standout season, looked fantastic. They really looked decent against Arkansas, the season opener following that season last year. Um, I thought they'd do a lot more. UCF is past their prime, if you want to go and
Mm-hmm.
call it that, when they were the national champions for whatever.
National
Um,
champion.
yeah, exactly. And BYU, they played Arkansas well in when the SEC went that way. I was impressed with them. I see them doing better than Texas Tech this year because I don't think Texas Tech is going to be used to the style of football that a school like UCF or BYU will bring to the table. Um, I think those new teams are going to stay towards the bottom for this first year just to get the hang of Big 12 football. Then in the next couple of years, I see BYU as the first to make the move and jump up into the contendings for a conference championship. But I mean, Cincinnati, UCF, there's just nothing there that surprises me.
Mm-hmm. I think BYU is the answer to this question. And the reason is BYU as an independent was already scheduling Power 5 teams. Last year
Yes,
on their
yes,
schedule, they were playing mostly Pac-12 teams, and those Pac-12
yeah,
teams were really good. They're playing Utah. They're playing that level of caliber, which Utah won the Pac-12 last year, in case anybody forgot. Like they have they're set up right now to
hmm,
play and be able to play with those teams. They may not beat those teams this year, but they have the recipe, they have the blueprint to be able to take that step forward now that they're in a Power Five conference.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think BYU, give them 3 years, they'll contend for a championship. Not national, but a Big 12 championship for sure.
And then with the expanded playoff, you're in. If you can win the Big 12, you're in.
And I love that. And I've been harping on that for years. I would like to see even a bigger playoff. Why not? Why stop there? Let's keep going. Take your Power Fives and then take a couple other people to fill out the rest. Um, I think if we're talking about, and I know we're going to come back to playoffs later, so I'll save that rant. But I think if you can clutch the Big 12 easily, you're going to do okay in the playoffs because this is a sneaky competitive conference. You got a lot of teams who on paper don't perform well, and then you play them on the wrong week, and they're fantastic. One of the
Yeah.
top teams in football. So I think whoever can clutch the Big 12 this year, I'm not going to say a national championship because you're still competing with the SEC, but I really think you can give them a run for their money.
It's just the depth. Like you're playing somebody
Yeah,
each week that's not necessarily great, but they're good enough
yeah.
that they're going to get you if you're not prepared. All right, let's head
I
on.
don't think. Sorry, just one
No,
more
you
thing about
good.
the Big 12. If we're talking about competition, there's no Vanderbilt in the Big 12. There's nobody that you go into it and you think, all right, we're going to kill them, easy win. Let's just walk to the next
Hmm.
week. You got to play every week. Even your teams like Houston, they haven't really. Or the one time I remember them beating Oklahoma, nobody thought that game was going to be close, and then Houston just snuck out in front and got the win.
Yep.
Um, so you know, it's a hard division.
You say not Vanderbilt, even Kansas. I mean, they won five straight games
Yeah,
last year. Like they're not easy anymore. So definitely difficult. Who you got Big Ten wise?
I love Michigan. I really do, and my reasoning for liking Michigan so much is because of the way that they contend anywhere. Every game you watch of Michigan kind of feels like a home game. Um, Michigan, the Big Ten is going to be one of three teams conferences: Michigan, Ohio State, or Penn State. There's
Hmm.
nobody else that I see can win the division. I mean, the Big Ten East is one of the most top heavy conferences or top heavy divisions in sports. You've got three teams that run college football for the most part, and then Maryland, Michigan State, Indiana, Rutgers. They're not going to compete against you. So I think it's good. Those three teams are going to be one to watch. On the other side of that bracket in the West, Nebraska's over. I don't see Northwestern competing after needing a new head coach, especially when you have a culture like that. Iowa,
Yeah.
Illinois, they're just not that surprising to me. Um, I like Purdue. You know, I'm big on the Boilermakers. In every sport, they're always going to be somebody that you just can't count out. Football, basketball, baseball, whatever the case may be, do not sleep on Purdue. They're going to be tough. 8-6 is not fantastic. 6-3 in the conference, that's pretty good. But I think the championship, I think it's going to go to Ohio State this year. I'm going to give it to them. I think Michigan will be much too played out from the teams that they schedule. I think their conference this year is really back heavy, and that's not going to help them at all. They're going to see a lot of their big time competition coming in the second half of the season, and Ohio State's just going to capitalize on that. I think if I bet you that Michigan will beat Ohio State in the game that they play against each other regular season. Once it's time for the championship, I don't see Ohio State or Purdue or Penn State competing with them. So I think this year in the Big Ten is going to go to Ohio State.
Nice. I have Michigan winning the league. From whoever decided to put Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State all on the same
I
side
know.
is
Yeah.
ridiculous because in any given year, any three of those teams could be the one competing for a national championship. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. And I mean, the
But
other side, the Big Ten West just isn't good,
nope.
flat out. To be totally honest with you, it's not a good division. You're so fixing the Big Ten to not be a decent watching experience. If
Yep.
I have to turn on the Big Ten championship game and watch Michigan destroy Illinois, I'm just bored. I
Yep.
don't. The Big Ten is my least favorite conference to watch because if it's not one of the three teams in the East, I honestly want nothing to do with it.
I agree. Though, to be fair, for this year, I think Luke Fickell at Wisconsin is going to be a very exciting team to watch. I think he's going to come in. Wisconsin's very much so like Iowa in the past, where they are run and gun. I'm going to run it down your throat. We're going to play old school
Yeah,
football. And I think Luke Fickell coming in is going to change that a little bit. You have some transfers. Mordecai, I'm pretty sure, the kid from
yeah,
SMU, transferred up there. I think he's going to bring a little bit of liveliness to the offense in Wisconsin, and I think you could see them
hmm
very easily winning that division like outright this year. Because who else is going to compete with them? Like Purdue will give them a chance. It's not going to be Nebraska. It's not going to be
no,
Iowa. Like the teams you have over there is very limited, and easily, if you're an above average team, you have a very good chance of winning that division.
yeah. And I mean, teams that are going to let me down. I've been saying this every year. It's Minnesota. Every single year, Minnesota lets everyone down. 9-4, yeah, everybody's going to say that they're going to do better. Here's what exactly what's Minnesota's going to do. They're going to win 3 weeks in a row to start the season. They won't win another game for 4 weeks, and then they'll figure it out again. But it'll be far too
Yep.
late for them to figure it out to make a run for the Big Ten. Every single season that happens, they start hot, get cold, and then relearn how to play football. I'm just not surprised. I wouldn't even say they're going to let me down because I'm not surprised anymore.
Mhm.
Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, that the whole bottom of the Big Ten West every year. I mean, Northwestern's not going to compete. Nebraska
Nope.
hasn't competed in 20 years. Minnesota up are the only ones that I could see doing anything, but even then, that is a stretch for me to say that I expect Minnesota to be mediocre. 9-4, that's okay. 5-4 in your conference in the Big Ten with who you're playing, that's not great. Um, 8-5 is or 9-4. You had the most wins overall in the Big Ten West, but I mean, still, who are you scheduling? Strength of schedule for them is poor. They just don't impress me at all, ever, really.
Yeah. I think Nebraska's an interesting team for me because we've seen what Matt Rule can do at Baylor. Like he can put together good college teams. It's just a matter of
Yeah,
when are they going to get there. I don't think Nebraska this year is going to be anything really special. They might win a couple of games that they maybe shouldn't have here and there, play a little
yeah,
spoiler, but I mean, for the long run, it's going to take Nebraska probably a good 3 to 4 years before they start to really make an impact in a what's going to be even harder Big Ten when Oregon, Washington, and the LA schools come in.
yeah. And while we're on the topic of that, I think that will totally change this division. Um, I think that will fix the problem that we just talked about, where the only watchable football in the Big Ten is the Big Ten East.
Hmm.
I think if you throw all these guys, like the guys that are coming into the West, that's going to be some really good football, because now you're going to have just stacked competition across the board in the West. So both divisions will be a lot more competitive. And I think bringing in, these Oregon teams, that's going to be who you're going to want to watch in the Big Ten West. Your LA schools, I think they'll compete, and I definitely think it's a great move for some of them. I think Oregon, with the new scene and with the new chance to beat Oregon again, I think that they're going to kind of run this division once that realignment happens.
Hmm. That'll be that'll be very fun to see because as long as USC doesn't have a defense, then that's going to
Yeah,
be the Achilles heel there. All right, if you don't have anything else in Big Ten, let's go on
ready to
to the
go.
SEC, the most fun conference.
So this is Georgia's conference. I will
Easily.
say this now. I have been saying this since I saw Tennessee beat Alabama. The Saban dynasty's over. We're done with it. The game's moving in a different direction, and that direction is Kirby Smart. I think they are going to shock a lot of people this year with just how good they are. 15-0 last year, that's pretty good. You don't see that record a lot outside of your big schools like Alabama, and even when they played Alabama, they looked fantastic. Um, I say Alabama will be the two. It'll be Georgia, Alabama again. I don't think Alabama will surpass Georgia in the rankings as far as just the SEC is concerned. Nationally, that's a different story. I think it'll be Georgia, Alabama competing for the SEC title again. Sleeper team to watch, Tennessee, of course. When I was deciding on which team I wanted to pick for who to watch, I wanted to believe the hype and choose South Carolina and really just fall in line with Beamer Ball. I can't make myself do it, though. I think Tennessee's got too much of a good thing going for them right now that they're going to be in the East as far as before realignments. In the East, Tennessee and Georgia will keep the competition there. Teams that are going to disappoint this year, Mississippi State, without a doubt. I do not see them continuing to have their success, especially, losing your coach. That's tough. I just don't know that they're going to have the recipe for success this year. LSU will be another team that will contend, and they'll be in the top 10, top 15 by the time the season's over. I think Arkansas is making steps in the right direction. I don't see them. This is not their year yet. If Pittman can keep growing this program, and if Pittman can keep fighting to make them the Arkansas that we saw in 2009 when they won the Sugar Bowl, I say that Arkansas will be up there with Alabama, Georgia in 2 to 3 years. Auburn, Texas A&M will continue to kind of trade off the bottom. I was thoroughly impressed with Texas A&M last year. 0-4 on the road, but man, they played tough no matter where they were. As far as the East is concerned, I think Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, that's for sure your top three. Florida might play a little better than Kentucky. I could see Mizzou kind of coming out of nowhere. I'm not saying they're going to win the
Hmm.
SEC, but I am saying that they're really going to get up there and compete this year. They're going to play some close games. I could see Tennessee. I don't know if Tennessee and Missouri are scheduled for each other, but I could see that being a really close game. And then I think Vanderbilt's just going to continue to struggle. Honestly, I think
They're
they
going to
need to repair.
continue to be Vanderbilt.
They're going to be Vanderbilt for the next for the foreseeable future, honestly, because that's just, at the end of the day, that's not where that school's focus is. Vanderbilt is well, they're a school. They are a academic institution at its finest. They compete well in baseball
Hmm.
specifically. I think they're fine in baseball. We can talk about that at a different time, but as far as football goes, Vanderbilt will continue to coast in last place. Team that's going to disappoint me is Kentucky. I'm a Stoops diehard. I will live and breathe the Stoops last name. It's just not working for him. 7-6, ended the season on a loss. 5-3 at home, 2-2 away, finishing under South Carolina. I mean, the pieces aren't there, and they're not making the moves to put the pieces there. They struggle defensively. Their offensive line is very subpar. I think that's a change that they're going to need to make before they can really jump out and be somebody in the SEC.
I get you. I understand. So for me, Georgia is obviously going to win the league. I think
Mm-hmm.
LSU will be there with them in Atlanta. I think LSU is going to win the West, and they're going to beat Bama again. Like you
Yeah,
said, last year, Bama had Bryce Young and Will Anderson, arguably two of the best people in the entire country at that point in time, aside from
yeah,
Caleb Williams. But if they don't have those people this year, then what makes them expect that they can do anything without them? Like you're going to have a
yeah,
starting quarterback that hasn't played as of yet. We haven't seen anything about him. The defense, I'm sure you can pack some people in there, but it's going to be fresh people in there that haven't played very much in the SEC. Alabama, I'm just going to say it like they could easily lose 3 games this year. They could finish the
Oh,
season 9 and
yeah,
3.
yeah, without a doubt. I
You
mean,
could
10-3.
lose like Texas, you're going to lose that game. On paper, you're losing that
Yeah,
game. Quentin
I agree.
Ewers should have beat him in Austin last year. He got hurt. You're lucky they didn't lose by 3 touchdowns. You
Yeah,
won by 1 point.
I think you could even see Arkansas sneaking in there and beating them. Because I mean, I feel like if you're an SEC team, when you play Alabama, you're playing Alabama. Like that's a big game for you. That's Georgia and Alabama. Those are the two teams that if you want,
All right. Well, apparently WebEx also has a time limit that I didn't know about. But anyway, continue.
I don't even remember what I was saying now. It got me thrown off. Wasn't
Uh,
expecting that.
it was something about Alabama and Georgia.
Alabama and Georgia. So if we look back at the past couple years, Georgia has been the most consistently competitive team for a long time. Um, LSU, the West, I could see going either way. I don't agree or disagree with you that LSU takes the West, and because Alabama's just not going to compete. I mean, like you said, Bryce Young gone. Who do you look to? I mean, they don't have that Alabama veteran starter like they have every year.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have like the Heisman winner doesn't play for Alabama this year. I guarantee you. I liked Bryce Young. I thought he was a fantastic leader, field general quarterback. I don't know that their new quarterback's going to be able to step in those shoes because the starting quarterback job at Alabama, that's not for anybody. A select few. This is somebody that is going to go on and make a huge impact in the NFL even.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can look back at, ever since like A.J. McCarron, Alabama's just had fantastic quarterbacks. So I think that success won't be there for them. So I think LSU's defense is good enough to play against the young, SEC inexperience, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
or Alabama offense.
Yeah, I think like last year they were within a hair. Like if Jimbo calls a better play, they lose at Texas A&M
Yeah,
too.
I agree.
Like I think they're going to lose to Tennessee again. Tennessee is
Yeah,
my team to watch because Tennessee with Joe Milton, like if Josh Heupel can make Hendon Hooker what he did last year, he can make Joe
yeah,
Milton. Like
yeah,
it's not going to
and
be difficult for him to take that step.
Tennessee might be my favorite team to watch as far as exciting games because you just don't know with Tennessee.
Hmm.
Do not count out Tennessee until the last play because you can't count on beating them. Sometimes Tennessee's going to have off games, and you really can't count on losing to them either. Um, Tennessee, if they can refine what they're doing and go out with the same mentality every week, that's not something we saw last year. I think if Tennessee can compete every week like it's Alabama, like it's Georgia, like it's LSU, Tennessee has a chance to win the East. It's a
Mhm.
stretch, but I think if they can play the way they have been, and if Georgia takes one or two losses, like I don't think they will. I could see them taking one loss, two. That's a stretch. But I think Tennessee has a chance to really nab on and either grab a playoff spot or B, the entire SEC.
I think for sure Tennessee's defense will be better than it was last year. I think
Yes,
they're bringing enough
that
people
was the
back
missing piece.
that they will be able to take what's needed to move forward. I mean, they played Georgia pretty close. I think it was like a
Yeah,
2 touchdowns, which compared to Georgia last year, that's pretty good compared to most
yeah.
teams. So if you can just bring that in, take that step, I think you can compete with Georgia in the East. Because I mean, nobody else. Maybe South Carolina might be able to do something. Florida's not going to. Kentucky's not
I
going
mean,
to.
hey, we
Like
said that last year, but did you the Missouri game?
that's
That
true.
was a Georgia. I
Georgia
don't
was
know.
scared for 90% of
Georgia
that
was
game.
very scared until I'd say with 5 minutes left in the third quarter, they were finally comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you can get if you can get ahead of Georgia in the first drive, they're playing with their backs against the wall the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And Tennessee has the ability to do that. I don't know about the quarterback stepping in this year. I don't know a lot about him. Herndon Hooker, if he had a chance to go, if you got him hot, you couldn't stop him.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they beat Alabama. That's how they won a lot of their games. I mean, that's how they won probably 8 of their 11 wins came from Herndon Hooker getting hot in the first 3 to 4 drives and riding that success for the next 4 quarters. So I think if their defense can play a lot better, which we just talked about, that's the missing piece for Georgia right now. And if their quarterback can compete on the level or better than Herndon Hooker in the next 1 to 2 years, that's Tennessee's division, and they're also them and South Carolina are my two teams to watch.
I got South Carolina is like I just South Carolina is my disappointing team, and I just don't know what Spencer Rattler I'm going to get. Like,
Yeah,
are we going to get 2020 Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma where he was just throwing dimes every game, or are we going to get the Spencer Rattler that we saw 21 and last year in the early half of
yeah.
the season with South Carolina? Like, he's just so inconsistent that I can't put him in there and be confident in saying, yeah, he's going to do this and he's going to do it well enough to get South Carolina up to where they want to be.
Yeah, I agree. I like Shane Beamer. I think he's young. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
ready to go. Um, I think Spencer Rattler in baseball we use the term big leaguing. He's kind of big league in the college football world right now. I remember when he got his NIL deal at Oklahoma and then just kind of fell off. He
Yep.
was coming to the games in Buick Escalades and Cadillacs, and for him to do all this and then to show up and not play, it almost makes you think he thinks he's not in college anymore. But he still has a lot to do. He still has to carry his team. I think when he got benched at Oklahoma for Caleb Williams, I think that was a good kick in the butt for him and a
Mm-hmm.
good way to get his mentality jump started. I think last year he showed me a lot of that same stuff he did when he was at Oklahoma. I think he just wasn't a team guy. This year that could change. I think Beamer has really gotten him honed in and ready to go. So I don't see them beating. I mean, it's tough because who are you going to beat? Tennessee or Georgia?
Mm-hmm.
You're South Carolina. You're fighting through a lot. I see them beating Kentucky. And on the other side of that, I mean, if they can squeeze out and beat Tennessee and place second, still got to beat Georgia.
Yeah. Like,
It's between Tennessee and South Carolina for me in the East
yeah, right
on
now, I think
who's to watch.
everybody else is playing for third place because it's going to go Georgia,
Yeah,
Tennessee, and then whoever else fight for it there at the end.
yeah,
One thing about Georgia, just kind of circle back a little bit. Georgia is in a really similar place to Alabama on the offensive side of the ball because everybody you got there, you don't know they haven't had much experience playing in the
yeah.
SEC. So you're playing young people and you're trying to see if they're going to be able to make that jump forward
I think if we're going to talk quarterback specifically, Stetson Bennett felt like he was at Georgia for 10 years,
for real.
like a career college student. And I think they'll be fine on every other aspect to cover up for whoever their starting quarterback is. And
Hmm.
that's not to say he's going to be bad. He may come out there and perform to the rest of his team's level, and they'll win it easily. Or he may come out, they'll drop 1 or 2 games, but his defense, his O line, and his wide receiving core, along with the running back who really surprised me last year, I think that they'll be able to still contend at that level.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see. The SEC is got four teams that I'm really looking at. It's like
Yeah,
you can make a push for the playoff, or you're going to be right there about that SEC championship level for sure.
yeah.
All right, if you have nothing else there, let's go on into the Pac-12.
Pac-12. I mean, this is USC's division in a lot of ways. With them, and it's tough to say with all the realignment that's going on. It's tough to say what the mentality is going to be this year. Colorado coming in, I don't expect a lot. I don't see a lot from Colorado. Everybody, Coach Prime, whatever. I just don't think it's going to be what people want it to be. I think Coach Prime is spectacular. I think he knows the game. He knows what it takes to play the game at a high level. Colorado has a lot of people transferring in, so now they're playing for Coach Prime. They're not playing for Colorado. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that means a lot. That means a ton in college football. And I just don't see that success carrying them. Arizona State, in all honesty, I just don't know about their program. I haven't watched a ton of Arizona State in the past couple of years just because I haven't really been inclined to tell you the truth. Oregon State, USC, Stanford, UCLA. I think that's where a lot of your competition is going to come from. My favorite team in the Pac-12, without a shadow of a doubt, is Utah. Utah plays some of the most fun football I've watched in a long time. They take everything right down to the wire. UCLA is fantastic too. Stanford struggled a little last semester. It's USC. You could make the case for Washington, even really competing. The team that's going to disappoint me this year is probably Washington State. They flew way under the radar last year and coasted, and then everybody, kind of thought with a 7-6 record, okay, that's a winning season. How can we maintain the success? They just didn't get a great recruiting class. They didn't get many I don't actually think they got any transfers in. So I think Washington State is going to disappoint me a lot this year. Same with UCLA. I think UCLA 9-4. Coming off a couple of years where they're a little subpar, losing their bowl game, it can go one of two ways with UCLA, and I just don't see it going well.
Mm-hmm. So I got USC and Washington in the Pac-12 championship.
I'll agree with that.
I think USC, I saw Lincoln Riley's offense for however ungodly amount of years at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're amazing. But that defense is not good. Now,
and that was the story when they were at Oklahoma.
Yeah, with that being said, they can make it to the playoff very easily, as we've seen several times. They just don't get any further than that. So USC getting to the Pac-12 championship, winning it, and even getting to the playoff is not like out of the realm of possibility. And I think it's what's going to be likely for this year. Caleb Williams is going to carry the offense. They're going to put up video game numbers again. And the defense is probably still going to be bad.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of the culture that was bred at Oklahoma when he was the coach.
Mm-hmm.
Every year, and me and you have talked about this since I've known you, their defense is just horrendous. Didn't get any better this year. That's what I think is going to hold them back in the Big 12 again. But I mean, Lincoln Riley doesn't know how to manage a team that has a spectacular defense because he's never had one. Even in the Bob Stoops era, there were some good defenses, but there weren't any defenses that I'm putting in the top 10 ever conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of the coaches that he's going to be playing against have either worked in organizations where the defense was fantastic or they've coached great defenses.
Yes.
And I just don't see Lincoln Riley knowing what to do when he plays a team with no weak spots on the defense. Let's say he gets to the playoffs and sees Georgia first round. Well, that's kind of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't see them being able to surprise anybody this season. If I'm being totally honest with you, I think USC will stay USC. Lincoln Riley it'll be Oklahoma a couple years ago. Yeah, they're going to win the Pac-12 and then they'll go on to not do anything in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, who else could win the Pac-12 and make an impact in the playoffs? Washington, Utah, Oregon, maybe. That's a stretch. Oregon, while we're on the topic of Oregon, I think Oregon could also disappoint me this year. Not a lot that I liked from them last year. 10-3, but I mean, against schools.
It was
like
a weird
Cal,
10-3, right? Like,
yeah.
Like
I mean, you're playing
double digits,
Cal
but
and yeah, you're not doing anything. I mean, 10 wins is spectacular. Don't get me wrong. I mean, placing third in the Pac-12 last year. Oregon State also went 10-3. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not great. So,
Let's not forget that Oregon got clapped by Georgia in the first game of the year last year.
they got destroyed. It was really tough to watch, and I distinctively remember turning that game off after the first quarter.
Yep. I Continuing on, Washington with Michael Penix Jr. is I think a team to watch because
Mm-hmm.
Michael Penix was really under the radar last year. I think he could be a like dark horse Heisman contender where he could be there in New
Okay.
York coming to the end of the year. Another team to watch, I think Oregon State with DJ Uiagalelei. He's coming in from Clemson. We're really going to get to see now. Was it a Clemson problem or was it a him problem? Because he's coming
Yeah,
into a fresh scene. He's going to be able to take Oregon State and do with it what he wants to because he's coming in. He's the guy. He's going to be the starter coming into the season. So can he take an Oregon State team who won 10 games last year and can he make a push for the Pac-12? They're going to be an interesting team to watch. Disappointing side is Colorado.
I agree.
Winning and competing for championships at Jackson State is a little different competing at Colorado when you're going against
It's
Caleb Williams, Cam
it's
Rising.
almost like saying I competed for a national championship at North Dakota State, so
Mm-hmm.
then I can go to Alabama and win a national championship. You
Yep.
know, that's just two totally different levels of football being played. Nothing against the teams that Jackson State's playing because that's exciting football, but none of those teams are USC. None of those teams are Washington. None of those teams are Utah. They've never experienced competition like that, and I don't think Coach Prime is going to be able to. I used this term last year. I don't think he's going to be able to showtime his way into a big spot. I think they're
Mm-mm.
going to have to struggle. They're going to have to continue to be Colorado for a couple of years. I mean, they're 1-11 last year, and they lost, what was it, 90% of those players.
Yep.
And I think that Jackson State mentality doesn't transfer well into Pac-12. And I say that because, I mean, who in Jackson State or who that Jackson State played could you compare to USC? Grambling, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's probably the USC of that side of football, but I just don't see them competing well here. I think
Yes.
they'll be okay. They may get a bowl game. I do not
I
see
think that's even
them
pushing it. Like they're going to be
that
scraping and clawing to get to 6 wins.
I said that and then I thought about it a little more because I mean, then you're expecting them to have a better season than Arizona had
Mm-hmm.
last season. And Arizona was okay. Arizona wasn't a bad team. They were just in a competition where there's so many. The Pac-12 has more good quarterbacks than any division ever. There are so many guys that you can talk about from this division that are star quarterbacks and will make a huge impact in the NFL, even historically. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, Mariota, a lot of those guys that played at schools just like these, UCLA, you've got a bunch of guys from there. Um, they don't have the defense. They don't have the wide receiver core to keep up with the safeties. They don't have the safeties to keep up with the wide receivers on the other side of the ball. It's just not. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
expecting a lot from Colorado this year.
It's crazy to look at the Pac-12 right now and be like, wow, they have a ton of depth in the
Yeah,
Pac-12. Like this is going to be a very interesting conference to watch, and then next year it's just all going to fall apart
yeah, it's all
and
going to
not be
go. And I
there.
mean, this is almost the end of an era football season because now we're seeing such a change. The first sign of this change was NIL.
Mm-hmm.
And I love NIL. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fantastic. I think they should get paid. I think they should have been getting paid for a long time. But now we're seeing a monopolization of college football
Yep.
with the big three. I mean, the big four. Um, I think it's just going to hurt things in the long run. So this is I'm going to watch a lot of Pac-12 football this year because I don't know how much longer we're going to have Pac-12 football to watch.
Just
Same
to
with
enjoy
same
it.
with maybe the ACC.
ACC will
So,
take a
but
little longer though.
ACC will take a little longer. Pac-12's on it's on its last legs, last couple breaths. It's still, I mean, this is going to be an exciting year for them,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. So I think it could be really good for them. So we'll see.
Cool. Well, that's all the conferences. So my top five for who I think in Heisman wise. First of all, Blake Corum, running back at Michigan. He's running behind a two-time
Yeah,
Joe Moore Award offensive line. Like I think this is the year. If he doesn't get hurt last year, he gets really close to beating Caleb Williams for the Heisman. But this year, I
Yeah.
think the difference is with this year is Caleb's already won a Heisman. So Blake Corum is going to have the ability to not get hurt, do what he did last year, and
Hmm.
be the only one to top it because the voters likely aren't going to give Caleb Williams a second Heisman, and he's just going to be able to do what he does at Michigan and take that Heisman from him.
Yeah.
Second place, Jordan Travis. Third, Michael Penix Jr. Caleb will finish in the top five at four, and then Jaden Daniels from LSU is who I got rounding out top five.
I like Jalen Daniels. I think if we're including LSU, and this is going to upset a lot of people, Malik Neighbors is one to watch for the Heisman. I'm going to say it now. We'll see if I still agree with that by the time the season's over. I love Malik Neighbors.
Mm.
I think as a wide receiver, that guy can go a long way in football. 1,000 receiving yards last season. He just looks fantastic every time you give him the ball. He finds open space. He knows how to read a defense well when he gets the ball. I agree with your 1 through 4, but I think Malik Neighbors because I had this exact same 1 through 4 as you. I think Caleb Williams will make a surprise appearance for us. I think the running back from Michigan, easily your number one. I think Malik Neighbors is up there though. I really liked his style of play. It's a style of play that even if he doesn't win the Heisman, it's going to transfer into the NFL so well that it won't even matter.
Mm.
Um,
He'd be
so
like a Jamar Chase, some more
exactly
receivers coming out of that school.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that this could be his year to really break out and to really find his stride. He had a year under a new coach, but I think this year he's going to be able to figure it out and get a lot more involved with the offense, even more so than he was. I mean, 1,000 yards is a lot, but I think now that he's shown that he can handle 1,000 yards and his passing, his catch percentage was fine. It wasn't anything spectacular. I think it was in the 60s, 70s. This is a guy to watch. I think he's my number 5 for the Heisman.
Nice. I'm glad we agree with Corum at the top there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is a guy that I think if he really shows out this year could be another generational college football talent.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of generational college football talents, Tavon Austin, you can go as far back as like AD at Oklahoma. I mean, there's just so many guys that you can pick. I think Corum could easily be one of those guys.
Nice. All right. Playoff and New Year's Six bowl predictions. Let's start with the bowls and then save the playoff here for last. So I'm just going to run through mine real quickly. The Fiesta Bowl, I got Notre Dame, Oklahoma. In the Cotton Bowl, I got Washington, and I think Boise State is going to be the group of 5 team to come out and get that bowl seed locked up. The Peach Bowl, LSU, Wisconsin. And then the Orange Bowl, Penn State, and Clemson.
Outright, I disagree with Wisconsin. I do not see them making that high of a bowl this year. I think if we're going to choose a team that would fit there, if we're not going to put Texas in the playoffs, I think that's Texas's bowl. That's about where their playing level is, I would say, roughly. Mm-hmm. I just am not a huge fan of Wisconsin. I think they just get steamrolled in that game. I don't think Wisconsin could level that out and keep up at that type of football yet. Give them a couple years. Right now, I don't think – I agree with everything else, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame, Oklahoma, that would be – with the expectation of Oklahoma coming into this year, that would be a really, really fun game to watch. That would be one of the better bowls of the season, I would assume. But I don't see Wisconsin making a New Year's Eve bowl.
I really debated with that one because I get, Ohio State. I think Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State's all going to lose to each other. Each one of those teams has come out with one loss, and it's going to be Michigan to Ohio State to Penn State, Penn State over Michigan. It's just going to be one of those type of seasons where you have a 3-way tie at the top, and then trying to figure out where they all go after that is difficult.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I can't see Wisconsin making enough of a splash in the regular season at any point because Wisconsin doesn't get hot ever. they're going to be who they are the whole year. Um, they're consistent with whatever direction they go in.
Hmm.
I just don't see them riding success, realizing their mistakes, and fixing their mistakes enough to compete in that big of a bowl game. Personally, um, not totally. They'll make a very high bowl game. Will it be New Year's Eve? No, but I think they'll absolutely be in a big time bowl.
It'll be end of December for sure,
Yeah,
around
absolutely.
there. I think an interesting matchup out of this is the Washington Boise State. If that was to happen, that would be an excellent game.
That would be your underdogs. I mean, that's 2014 college football right there. That's not. I'm not going to say old school yet, but that's a little throwback.
Hmm.
Those are two teams that I would love to watch that game. That would be high energy. I think a really even playing field as far as who's going to win, who's going to lose. It'd be tough for me to take a money line on that because those are two very similar teams.
Boise State is a team since 2000 that's like in the top five most wins. Like they've been
Yeah,
playing at a high level of football. Early 2000s, I mean, they kicked OU's butt in the Fiesta Bowl in '07.
yeah.
Like they've been there, done that several times, and it'd be just another part of their history to come in and do it again.
Hmm.
I'll let you go first on this one. Who you got for your playoff top four?
So my playoff top four, I'm going to go now. This took a while for me to think about because my 2, 3, and 4 are all from the same conference. I've got Georgia, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Bama, TCU, LSU, USC. That was my original top 10 ranking. My top four, I think it'll be Georgia and Michigan as 1 and 2. And then I think we'll see Bama, Penn State at 3 and 4. Um, I don't know if I'll agree with that tomorrow after I've thought about it, now that I've just said it. But for now, that's what I'm going to go with. I think Bama will hold it off long enough to maintain the success they've had. If not Bama as the number 3, I'm going to say LSU will sneak in there. I don't see any team like USC or Tennessee sneaking into the playoffs this year. I think it'll be Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. Your 4 is kind of up in the air.
Hmm. So my number one, I have Michigan. I think Georgia will be losing later on in the season, and
Mm-hmm.
then Michigan will be able to pop up to number one towards the back of the season. I got Georgia at number two. I'm putting Florida State in as a
Okay.
one-loss ACC team at number three, and then number four is always the hardest to try to predict because I got like five teams that I could put in that
Yeah.
spot. But kind of like I said earlier, I think USC with a bad defense can squeak into that fourth spot, win the Pac-12, probably beat a Utah or somebody that they lose to in the regular season, kind of get that
Mm-hmm.
avenge that, and then get in squeezing really tightly into the playoff there in number four.
Yeah, the 4 spot's always been kind of up in the air ever since the playoffs have started. I mean, we've seen Washington, we've seen some pretty, it's a revolving door.
Hmm.
Um, there's a list of 5 teams that every year I think will make the playoffs in that 4 spot. I've never right about it. I've never actually been right about who I pick for the playoffs, as just to state that on record. But right now, I think Georgia, Michigan as your 1 and your 2 would be the best option for the playoffs because that's probably going to be your national championship. I see Georgia beating whoever the 4 is, and I see Michigan beating Ohio State twice in the season.
Hmm.
I think it being a neutral site game will help out both of those teams a lot because you're not going to have to play at Ohio State, but God, you're not going to have to play at Michigan either.
Yep.
So I think that will be probably the biggest game to watch in the playoffs will be Michigan and Ohio State. I think it'll
Hmm.
be SEC and Big Ten.
Yeah, I got the same thing. Michigan, Georgia in the title game. Though I am gonna change it up a bit, add some pizzazz, and I think Michigan is gonna come away and take the national title this year away from Georgia.
I can see that, and I only say that because I've seen how they play when they're not expected to win.
Hmm.
Every year, the one game that I make time for is Michigan Ohio State. That's one of my favorite games every year because Michigan has such a chip on their shoulder going into it. And when they play with that mentality of we have to win, they are the best team in college football. However, I don't see them being better than the SEC in prime time.
Yeah.
Every year, I mean, Ohio State's tried it. They can't beat the SEC. Clemson kind of got up there. They don't have a winning record against the SEC. You know, I just think it'll still continue to be an SEC ran NCAA football season,
Mm-hmm.
but I think Michigan will be your team to watch. Sleeper pick for who could win the Natty, Penn State. I think they could really show out if they could
It's a
beat
great
Michigan and
option.
Ohio State. If they can issue a loss to both Michigan and Ohio State, why can't they beat Georgia? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think this could be the year of the Nittany Lions.
Penn State this is kind of Michigan and Penn State are really similar in the way like this is their year. If
Yeah.
not this year, then when? Because
Yes.
James Franklin has his best team since 2016, and he's ready to make a run for it.
Yeah.
Now, where they'll be in that option is going to be tough because, like you said, you got to go through Michigan and Ohio State just to even get to your conference championship game. So
Yeah.
if you can get there, you can take out both of those, if not just one of those, then I
Hmm.
think you're going to be really set and primed to get into that top four.
I agree. Yeah.
Because if Ohio State loses to both Michigan and Penn State, you could see a scenario last year where Penn State possibly squeaks into that number 4 seed, much like Ohio State did with
I
against
think
Georgia.
if Penn State can squeak into three, I think three is where they need to be. If they can get that 3 seed, play Michigan, beat Michigan, and then play in the national, I think they'll have a better shot at automatically going right into the playoffs, having to face Georgia at the number 4,
Mm-hmm.
and then probably losing that game. But I think if they can play well enough to get that 3 seed locked in and make Alabama play Georgia, I think then your best chance, that's the best possible chance for Penn State to win this
Mm-hmm.
thing, is if they play Michigan in the first round, but on the other side of the bracket, Georgia and Alabama play. Because
Yeah.
now whoever wins that game is going to be way too tired to play the national championship because they've just exhausted all their resources. And Penn State could come off hot from a win against Michigan, who's their division rival, and
Mm-hmm.
come in and play hot in that national championship. They are probably my sleeper team to win it all. They have a clear shot to do it, but it's can they have the regular season to do it?
Mm-hmm. I agree. That's a very good pick. All right. To close this out just a little bit, we have voted on our poll, and so our top 10 is Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU round out the top 5, and then Penn State, USC, Florida State, TCU, and Texas finishes out the top 10 for the Wagon Wheel Sports preseason poll. What do you got? Any surprises in there that you didn't expect?
No, I figured Texas would be somewhere up there. They were in mine at 10 because I figured that's about where their talent level is right now. Florida State's a little higher than I put them. I put them at 9. If they can compete well in the ACC, you could maybe convince me that they're top 6. Penn State's a lot lower than it needs to be, in my honest opinion. I think 6 is a little too low. I would switch LSU and Alabama, and then Alabama and Penn State.
Hmm.
USC's right about where I thought they'd be. I agree with your top 3. Like we said earlier, the Big Ten, that part of the Big Ten is the best division in college football to watch. But I agree with Georgia, your number 1, Michigan, your 2, and then Bama or Ohio State at 3. But other than that, I mean, only way I'd change it up is Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. But I definitely can understand and agree with aspects of the case for Alabama being your number 4.
Hmm. One of my bigger surprises was I did not expect to see TCU in this for the preseason because me
Yeah,
personally, I'm expecting TCU like a 7, 8 win season. So that was a little
I
surprising for me for
don't
sure.
I don't know that I put them at all in my top 10. So I agree. I put Tennessee in place of TCU.
Hmm.
But I don't see. I think they will be good for the Big 12, and I think they will compete in the Big 12 very heavily. I don't think TCU competes on a national level, and I think a lot of that is because of Max Duggan being gone.
Yep.
I will never tell you that a quarterback can carry a football team, but I will say a quarterback can set a football team up for success on the national level. They don't have Max Duggan to do that for him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that success continuing for them personally. That's the only asterisk I would put in this top 10.
And think about the flukiness of last season for them. They had to play from
Yeah.
behind like 3 or 4 times, and then like it's like 4 or 5 straight games of the starting quarterback for their opponent getting hurt and not
Yeah.
playing the second half of that game. So that is TCU. That's not going to happen this year. They were like the opposite of Oklahoma. Like they got all these close games to the end when Oklahoma didn't.
I agree. I don't see this year outside of Texas. I really don't see the Big 12 competing in the top 10. I think if Oklahoma could surprise some people, maybe they squeeze in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's really up to. I think the Big 12 representation in the top 10 is between Oklahoma, Kansas State, and Texas.
Yeah. Kansas State's going to be interesting without Deuce Vaughn. See what they can come out and do.
I agree. I was just about to say that. Yeah, I think that's an aspect that they're going to have to take into account. Kind of what do we do now? You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying they're not in my top 10. That's why it's the only reason I didn't put them in my top 10. They're going to be they may be 11. If I could have 10A and 10B, they'd be 10B.
Yeah.
So I definitely think they'll compete. I don't see them breaking top 10 though.
I went back and forth with myself because my 10 team was Texas. I think that on paper they're a top 10 team, but I was going back and forth between Texas, Tennessee, and Clemson, and who I thought was going to fit into that hole. One thing about Clemson, they have 9 starters on defense coming back this year.
That's
when I
big.
saw that, I was like, that's crazy.
That's huge. That can save your season. Now you have people, you're not having to teach them the playbook. They know what's going on. They know their roles. They know how to fit in. That could be the only thing that keeps Florida State out of the top 10. Do I think Clemson makes the top 10? Absolutely not. Do I think Florida State losing to Clemson keeps them out of the top 10? Yes, I do wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But I don't think Clemson's good enough to compete in the top 10 right now. They're just not what they were in Dabo's prime.
You lose Venables for that defense, and it's
yeah,
really
and I mean
the same last year.
That kind of screws you in a lot of ways. That's the only reason I wouldn't have Clemson in my top 10. I think their offense will be fine. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Florida State out of the ACC is the team that needs to be in the top 10 right now. Right now. That'll change after week 1, I'm sure. Florida State right now needs to be in the top 10.
I agree. All right. Well, that's all I got note-wise. If you got anything else for us?
No, man, I'm glad to be back on. Looking forward to the next one. Really looking forward to some college football.
That's right. Hopefully, I want to do a couple more of these throughout the season. Probably like every third of the season comes out, we just pop a video covering what happened in that quarter of the season.
Sounds good. I'll be happy to come back.
All right. That sounds good then. And I'll see you next time.